Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my fifth and final installment of my record prediction series for every single Big Ten team. We will be focusing on my bottom four teams in the Big Ten. If you've watched this series, then you will know that UCLA is in there, Purdue's in there, Indiana, Northwestern, and Minnesota, though not in that order. So, if you've watched this series before, good on you. But for people that have not, I will explain to you. I have three swing games that I have picked out of their schedule. I have the whole schedule up there and each game predicted as a win or a loss. And but chiefly, we will look at the swing games because I just don't want to waste time, focusing on, Maryland versus UConn, for example. I don't want to focus on your Power Four team going on to play your cupcake non-cons. So I have three swing games that we will be looking at for each team, and that's chiefly how the video will run. I'll give some overall thoughts on the teams. This video is a video that I don't like to make. I don't like to really trash on teams, really make them look bad, but objectively, there will be bad teams in this league. So these are mine, and let's just dive right in. All right, so my first team in this video, but my 14th ranked team in the Big Ten is the UCLA Bruins. I have them going 4-8. So let's dive right in. My first swing game is when you play host to Indiana in week 3. I think that this is a very important game for them to get, right on the road, start out 2-0 because I have them beating Hawaii, and I have them winning this game. I could see it go either way. Really depending on how good Indiana's offense looks. I think we know what we're going to get from UCLA. Ethan Garbers is a solid quarterback. There are plenty of holes on this roster, but they are talented enough to win a couple games in this new Big Ten, in my opinion. There are just a couple automatic losses in a row there in week 4, 5, and 6 when you play LSU, Oregon, and Penn State. Then comes my second swing game when you play host to Minnesota. You've just played 5 games in a row. You're 2-3, and you need a win bad to really stay in contention for whatever, a bowl game, anything that you want to play meaningful football in November. You really got to win this game, and I think they do come out and beat Minnesota at home. Minnesota's got to, fly all the way out to the West Coast. It'll be a different vibe for Minnesota, and I think that UCLA will do enough through their aerial attack to win that game. Excuse me. Then you take an L to Rutgers. Then you finally get that second bye there. Coming off of the bye, I think you do lose at Nebraska, you lose to Iowa, and then you get to my final swing game when you've travel to the Washington Huskies. Now that is a great environment. I think UCLA, going to be a bit overwhelmed in this game, and I think UCLA drops that game. But I could see UCLA winning. This is the really only other game besides the Fresno State and Hawaii game that I think that they will be closest to winning. I don't think that they're going to be really close to Nebraska or Iowa or even Rutgers, USC for that matter. So I think if they're going to win another game, it's going to be when they travel to Washington. Just traveling up there doesn't bode well with me, especially this late in the season. Weather's gotten cold up there, and I just think that UCLA is going to lose that game. You finish out by beating Fresno State and going 4-8. All right, my next team, second team of the video, and 15th ranked team is the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I have Minnesota going 4-8, taking a pretty a larger step back in talent. I know that they went 6-7 last year with that bowl game win, but I think the quality of play is not going to be there from the Minnesotas of the past. So let's dive right in here. I think you take a loss to North Carolina. I think North Carolina is much more talented and will play a better brand of football. You beat Rhode Island and Nevada. You lose to Iowa, Michigan, and USC. I think those were all pretty considerable losses. Then you play at UCLA. We've talked about this game before. in this video, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I'm going to say that I don't think Minnesota, it's going to be a whole new vibe out there on the West Coast, quite literally. And I think Minnesota just won't have the firepower to beat UCLA. I could be wrong about that. They could beat UCLA. I can very much see it happening, but this is how I see it. Second swing game, you're coming off the bye. You play host to Maryland. I think you win this game. PJ Fleck is going to have his team ready to go. That's the first bye. They played 7 straight games. And during that bye week, he's going to get on their case. They're 2-5 at that point, fighting to stay alive. And I think they go out and beat Maryland. And in the third swing game, the very next week, I think they go out and beat Illinois in Champaign. PJ Fleck is going to have these 2 games game planned and ready to go. And I think that they execute that game plan, and I think they win those 2 games. But then I think you lose to Rutgers and Piscataway. You take that final bye week, but you play 2 really tough teams in Penn State and Wisconsin, and I think you lose both those games as well. I'm just personally not a believer in FCS Max Brosmer transferring from the FCS level. I'm just not a huge fan of that. Their defense as a whole last year was pretty bad. I know that they return a ton, but when you return a bunch of bad players, in my opinion, yes, they will get better, but I just say how much better are we talking? If they can make a big stride on defense, and if FCS Max can make a couple plays, I can see them going 5-7, possibly digging out a game at Rutgers, possibly beating Iowa again. But really, this is how I see it. I see them going 4-8. All right, next team up is the Purdue Boilermakers. They have an interesting non-con, to say the least. They play host to Notre Dame. They travel to Oregon State, who plays them Pac-2, and then they have their cupcake in Indiana State. I think they beat Indiana State. They lose to Notre Dame, and my first swing game for them is at Oregon State. This game is pretty interesting in my opinion. 2 different styles, 2 different methods of playing. Oregon State, complete and total rebuild. They got stripped of a lot of their talent in favor of going to Michigan State and other programs in general after their head coach left. If this was a Jonathan Smith-led Oregon State team, I would say Oregon State would probably beat Purdue. But I think Purdue comes out and beats Oregon State. It's year 1 for Oregon State. Not a whole lot of talent there. I think Purdue goes out and wins that one. You lose your first Big Ten game to Nebraska. You lose to Wisconsin. And my second swing game here is at Illinois. I could very much see Purdue winning this game, but I think Luke Altmaier makes enough plays. I know that's saying a lot of him, but I think he makes enough plays, throws up a crap ton of yards, and I think that they go out and beat Purdue. I could totally see it be the sides being switched. I could see Hudson Card, going out and torching the Illinois secondary, and I could see the Purdue secondary being enough of a lockdown secondary to prevent Luke Altmaier from going off. I just see it differently, and I think Illinois will win that game. Then you take your automatic L to Oregon, and you get your second bye, a much-needed bye. You are 2-5 at that point in time. You go out very disciplined game plan, and you come out off the bye week and you beat Northwestern in my final swing game. If you don't win this game, I can't see Purdue winning any more games on their schedule, and they would go 2-10, in my opinion. That's how important this game is. I think the Northwestern game hinges on their season being a success or a failure. Again, Purdue has a very, very tough schedule. Let's not get twisted about it. They have a tough non-con, and they play Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and they play 2 teams that I'm very high on as well in Nebraska and Wisconsin. So, this non-con, the conference schedule itself is brutal. The non-con is hard in and of itself. So let's not get that twisted. I think if they won 4 to 6 games, I think that would be viewed as a moderate success in my opinion. If they got to a bowl game, that would be super for them. Again, that's a bit of a tangent, but versus Northwestern, I think you get a quality win there. We'll talk about Northwestern in a second and address their issues in a second. Then you're going to take 2 automatic L's to Ohio State and Penn State. You lose at Michigan State. I talked about Michigan State before. I am higher on them than a lot of people. and I think that they're going to make a bowl game. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and watch it. I encourage you to do so. If you are new to this channel, go ahead and watch the season previews. Go ahead and watch the season predictions. I've made playlists for all of them. Go ahead and watch them. Week 14, I think you beat Indiana. Indiana at that point in time, well, we'll save the Indiana for later in the video, but really, I don't see Indiana doing too well. Let's just say that. Purdue going 4-8 this season. All right, so that leads me into my next team, Northwestern. Northwestern, first swing game, you play host to Duke. In order for Northwestern to have a lot of success this season, they have to come out hot out of the gate because their back half of the schedule is pretty darn hard. So, Northwestern, and by the way, all things considered, this schedule isn't that bad. I just think Northwestern is pretty bad. Northwestern plays host to Duke. I think that they beat the Duke Blue Devils in a tight game, in a game that will probably be very close. I think Duke and Northwestern are about on the same level, but I think Northwestern will go out and beat Duke. They're scrappy, they're physical, and they're well coached. It's just the talent's not there, in my opinion, except for Cam Porter. With Northwestern. You beat Eastern Illinois, then you'll lose at Washington. This is a game that if Northwestern goes out with enough physicality, they could possibly win. I'm not ruling out the possibility of a win there, but I think that they lose to Washington. Then you take your first bye and you're 3-1. Then you come out of the bye, second swing game versus Indiana. That's why I think that they have to come out and have a fast start to the season. That's why 2 of the 3 swing games are in the first half of the schedule. They have to come out fast. That first half of the schedule, if it's a more talented team, is a piece of cake. But Northwestern is not as talented as most teams in the Big Ten. So they have to come out and they have to play well in this first half. And I'm not sure if they're going to do that or not, but I think coming off of that first bye, they beat Indiana at home. Not sure how much of a home field advantage a glorified high school stadium is, but nonetheless, I think that they will beat Indiana. They'll play good enough defense and they'll play more just physical enough. That's why this reoccurring thing with Northwestern. They play really aggressively and they play really physically. So really, they are really good at the fundamentals of football. It's just I just don't think the talent is there. I know I've said that a lot. I think you lose to Maryland. I think you lose to Wisconsin, Iowa, Purdue, bye week, Ohio State, and Michigan. At that point, it's a bit of a collapse, but I think your final swing game here is versus Illinois, and I think you lose that game as well. We talked about Illinois earlier, setting up a 4-8 season. All right, the last team, the number 18th ranked team. Now at the bottom, you can see 1-18 all the way through. Let me just read it out for you. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Rutgers rounds out the top 5. The next 5 would be Nebraska, Iowa, USC, Wisconsin, and Washington. The next 5, going from 11 to 15, would be Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland, UCLA, and Minnesota. And the bottom 3 would be Purdue, Northwestern, and Indiana. Indiana, you got 3 swing games here. I think you beat the Leathernecks and the Panthers. Going to UCLA, if you want this season to really be a good first season, you got to beat UCLA, and I don't think they beat UCLA. At Michigan State, your next one, I think that Michigan State, if Indiana catches Michigan State at the right point in time, I think that they can beat them. I think that Indiana matches up the best with Michigan State. That's why I don't have a Northwestern game or a Maryland game as that second swing game. But I do think that they dropped this one to Michigan State, and I think they dropped the next one to Purdue as well, the next swing game. Again, if they catch Purdue really struggling, if Purdue really isn't putting up that much of a fight to Michigan State, I could see Indiana winning this game. But I think that Purdue is talented enough to win this game. So that ends my season predictions for the Big Ten. I put a lot of effort into it. So if you could like the video, that would be very much appreciated. Subscribing to the podcast will help out immensely. It's the equivalent of a $10 super chat, in my opinion. Just your subscription is worth $10 to me. But anyway, that's all for me today. I have more videos coming out, but I do have an update for the channel that needs to be addressed, and that will be coming out by the end of this coming week. I have your Big 12 predictions all set up and ready to go, SEC and ACC all ready to go. Now those will be dropping rapid fire 3 straight days in a row this week, sometime this week. So thank you guys so much for watching. Again, subscribing is the best way to support the podcast, I think, and liking the video and commenting your thoughts below on these teams and any other team in general that you want talked about. Anyway, that's enough jibber jabber for me, and I will see you guys in the next one.